How was Hawaii? Did you have a good trip?
It was wonderful. I'm just putting my phone on airplane mode. I have a friend who only calls me when I'm doing live things.
Yes.
Seriously. Yeah, so it was a great trip. I was humbled when I arrived. I was greeted by Hawaiians who were at the airport and, at the car dealer place. And then a car rental place. And then once I got into the world, I realized I was on this occupied land really quickly. And so it was sort of a crashing. It was sort of like I had let it go. And so it was, what do you call it? It was sweet and it was just, yeah, what I ended up doing was finding the places that were Hawaiian owned. Very interesting thing happened to me, which was I watch YouTube is like my thing, for motivation, for mindfulness, and for news. But PBS, for some reason, it just ended up on my feed. This very strange PBS story about how half of the Hawaiians had to leave because they couldn't afford to live there, and it just really then brought it home even more. I tried to be as graceful as I could as I was there, and finding Hawaiian places when I was mostly was at a retreat center, but when I wasn't, like trying to support the Hawaiian people in my choice of food when possible. So, it's paradise. It's a land created out of volcanic rock that defined life in that from that rock just came green, just came life. And it's amazing what nature does if we leave it alone, right? And it's so sad that we can't, and when I say we as a human, as a species, mostly, I don't know that that's true although everywhere around the world, I really don't know, but that we can't be graceful with it, that we can't like be with it. And so I loved my experience. I was there with 14 other black men, and 9 of us were engaging in a project of deepening our capacity for Platonic touch and to be in emotion and share emotion as black males. Identify as a male, not necessarily a man, and it was a really beautiful experience to be with people who want to heal. Some of who still weren't ready to touch, even though computers making noise, even though it was like their first or second time around. I mean, their second time around, and just being with that, like just meeting people where they were at. It was very spacious. I was mostly participating, and I offered some embodied practices and awareness practices. Let me know if I'm talking too much, but we had this ceremony. What did we do with the tea leaves? We were doing something with these tea leaves, and they were giant from these little trees, right? And so the guy was sort of like, we're going to take the leaves off the tree and then, pick your leaves, and then we're going to, he's going to microwave them, make them soft. We're going to fold them into something. Oh, right. That we were then going to create like these decorations that we were going to offer to the volcano. And so my role seemed to be continually, well, can we first ask to take the leaves? Like, can we show some reverence for the life, that and so that seemed to be a lot of my role, was just those moments when we were stepping over something. And so I was grateful for that opportunity and for how well it was received, because everybody there was really intentional on living, our lives in this way that honors ourselves and each other. But they just didn't, they weren't aware, there wasn't that awareness of like, this means everything. This means how, how before, the gratitude that we offer before we eat, not just to the cooks in the kitchen, but the people who, in our time there, is when the transition of office happened. So, I've been doing this for a little, maybe a decade or so. Um, I give thanks to the people who picked and grew the food and all the people along the way, because I don't know if the person who picked my food this morning that I'm about to eat isn't being deported in this moment. So just being able to offer those kinds of opportunities to be in connection with all of it, in gratitude, and not necessarily having to go down into the sadness or the harshness, right, or the grieving, but just to be able to say, I see you, I know you're there, you are part of my healing process. I am healing so that I can possibly make a positive change in your experience, whether it's other human beings or the planet.
Wow, what an important experience that you had, and like what I'm hearing a lot is like, yeah, there's this like deepened connection and this intentional awareness of that connection, but also too, and I wanted to kind of maybe get into this more a little bit, but there's this contact element too, where you are recognizing uh, a a need among the people that you're doing the retreat with to want to have a deeper engagement with Platonic touch and to be with each other in that way, and like literal physical contact. And then also too, you're being mindful of, taking the leaves, and when you take them, you are physically grabbing them and taking them off the tree, and there is that contact you're having with nature.
Right.
And then that really can be quite an expansive thing, like what you're talking about, where I'm in contact not just with the people I'm on retreat with, and in these defined zones of lessons and learnings and reflections, but when I am maybe eating dinner and I'm thinking about the food that I'm all that through this interdependence that we're all kind of more or less atta- you know together with. And so what a important thing to be engaging with, and especially just that physical element, that physical element. I just was curious about like what for you wanted to deepen or to uh have a greater experience or understanding of Platonic touch, in that environment? Like what made you kind of want to explore that more?
Thank you. First, I want to name that the leader of this project is Aaron Johnson, and the project is called the Chronically UnderTouched. And part of what I was doing that I wasn't aware of the second time, this was my second retreat. What I wasn't aware of the first time is that there's actually a film called Dark and Tender that explores this idea. I was introduced to Aaron probably 8 or 9 years ago, while I was in therapy, through my through my therapist, who was introducing me to this idea of being comfortable with Platonic touch. And some of that comes from, it's not something that I experienced a lot after losing my mom when I was 11. And so there just wasn't a lot of cuddling in my family or anything like that. And then in addition, I also left home early. So living as the way I lived my life as a masculine, female-bodied person, or person labeled female at birth, was I spent a lot of time with guys. And in my experience with guys, there wasn't like a lot of hugging and playfulness. It was mostly, there's usually like, there might be violent touch where you like, hit somebody, right? And of course we see that as affection, right? Don't get too close, right? And, you know, the shoulder hug, right? And then, you know, there were, when I was younger, there might have been some sexual touch, but I wasn't really into guys in that way. Um, and then it kind of rolled off, even when I was with women, and I was very promiscuous as a young person. It was mostly as it was sexual touch that happened, but there wasn't a lot of cuddling or touching that happened outside of that. I actually, I mean, and I'm talking about like decades ago, so now I'm in my 60s, and then sometime in my 50s, I remember, which wasn't that long ago, but I was in the community Dharma leadership program at Spirit Rock, and one of my peers sort of was giving me this hug, and you know, I'm like, hug, go, you know, and she's like, where are you going? And I'm like, you know, it's time to stop hugging. And I wasn't feeling anything sexual towards her. It just was, you know, that it was not comfortable. And and then rolling out of that and just working on how do I receive touch that's platonic. And sometimes even sexual, where I would be the person who was the aggressor and I rarely let anybody come towards me. And so just a whole thing around touch. And so I was very glad. Aaron and I did not connect when we were first connected. We sort of played phone tag because we were both really busy. And then last year, somehow we got engaged in conversation, and he invited me to the first Brown and Tender film retreat, and that's how it began. And this time he had me do a little bit of co-leading, but it was some co-leading, but mostly I got to participate in what was both platonic touch, but also a deeper sharing, a more vulnerable space that's where you know I'm good at. So being able to model that in the workshop, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's well, and thank you for sharing that. I know like that a lot of that is like a very deep personal journey for you, and so I appreciate you going into that. And just from like what you're experiencing now having done that retreat, do you have like a sense of more comfortability with your body, with sharing your body, and also too with that vulnerability? Because yeah, like, especially for myself as someone that grew up labeled male and identify as male and everything, and I grew up around a bunch of guys. Yeah, affection is something that's very interesting to navigate. Physical affection. um my friend group growing up, we actually did hug quite a bit, but there was also full contact sports happening, and all kinds of other things that made it so that there's some uh, affection through some sort of maybe pseudo violence. But I was just curious if like when it comes to being present with others like that, and what that vulnerability was, did it eventually become less vulnerable, or did you become more comfortable in the vulnerability? I was just kind of curious, like what your takeaway from the retreat has been.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Is so I kind of I've chosen vulnerability to be one of my superpowers, but I can't say that I've taken it so much as much to the physical. Like it's something that I've been working on. Um, I dated someone for a short time, and we did some working on that as well. So I have to say that I'm still a little bit of a work in progress, and probably more willing now to open more. There's lots of time, you know, I have a friend that when we hug, it still feels a little bit like protective. We'll hold each other for, you know, maybe 5 seconds or whatever, maybe 10 seconds. But we love each other, but you can still feel the protection. And I think that's probably mutual. Um, but I feel like I'm a work in progress, but it feels good. I have a couple of other close friends where I'm going to see if I can get them to engage in like holding hands together and doing it for whatever like I just want to practice what I've been learning in small ways. And 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds, and see what comes up. Because I also know that that's going to just deepen our, like, we love each other, we care about each other, and we hold back tears when we're ready to cry. So how do we like really lean in when outside of a crisis, right? So, you cry at the breakup, you cry at somebody dying, right? Because you can't help it. But when something's hard and something's challenging, and so that you can go to this place of, it doesn't even have to be physical touch, but this place of not trying to fix, because that's another way to sort of shut down emotions. So that you can have a place of more open emotions, which I'd say it's also work I've done over the years, and I feel much better at.
Yeah, that place of not fixing, I mean, that sounds like exactly the hard spot for a lot of people to be in, you know? That sounds exactly where um I can just, well, oh, we're going in for a hug, I'm not going to say anything even though it's not really comfortable for me, but I'll just go in and just just deal with it, and then go away, but then there's this like, well, I'm feeling very anxious, and can I really be with that anxiety? Can I like the way to actually, before we go in for the hug, can I just like take a second to like understand what's going on with me right now?
Yes.
Um, of course, not every social situation maybe allows for the time for that, but maybe it's important to take the time for that. And just on the not necessarily that physical contact, but still that vulnerability through a physical body. I wanted to know if it, through the retreat or through any of the work that you've been doing, involves eye contact, like prolonged eye contact, because I know that um, I have a theater background, and I've done some things that I believe are Meisner exercises, but they might be associated with another theater person, theater figure. But there are these times where you'll be standing feet away from somebody else, usually a stranger, usually someone that's doing this class with you, and you will be doing direct eye contact for like 30 seconds, or it'll feel like a lot longer or something like that. But here you are, you're opening up into their soul, and you are being you because acting and theater stuff is it's all about vulnerability, and there you are trying to take off some of those armored layers and be with a complete stranger. Um,
Mhm.
but that eye contact can be, uh, there's no physical touch, but it can be quite intense. And I was just curious if eye contact for you plays a role in some of this healing that you're doing, or if it has played a role in some of these exercises that you've done.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I went right back to first learning about that exercise with Joanna Macy as another part of a Spirit Rock program. And then jumping to going to an event that was called Three Black Men with Resma Menachem, I believe, Bayo Akamalafe, and I can't remember Orlando's last name, but three black men led this group, and we were a group of 45 black men, and I remember doing that exercise and how deep it was. But we didn't actually engage in that in this group, and I remember thinking about it, but like I said, I wasn't leading it, so that would have been an interesting. But the exercises that we did do had us close together. So, for example, we might sit thigh to thigh, and or hold hands, and or touch feet. And we did talk to each other, but we didn't engage in that intentional eye contact, which would be really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but even then, I mean, like, the people maybe in American society, handshakes and hugs and maybe shoulder pats and various things like that are more consistent with societal norms. But touching feet on purpose too, that's the kind of a unique um, and maybe more of an intimate form of touch that goes
Exactly.
beyond some of those other things.
Or even thigh to thigh.
You certainly, yeah,
Right? So
yeah.
just sitting opposite each other, but yeah, having your knees or your thighs touch. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to make this retreat, and that you were able to get so much from it, and that you are, work in progress is something that I fully appreciate myself. So I am glad that you were able to show up and to do this work for yourself. It's really amazing. And then also as we were talking about that connection, and we were talking about the administrative change that's been going on in the country, and how it's affecting economies, how it's affecting relationships with food supply and everything like that. And I've seen some talks from you online, and I've seen your website with affirmativeacts.org, and I've seen a lot of your work, and it's all about deepening that love and compassion for others and for yourself, and how that can more or less lead to substantial change, fulfilling change. And as we chug along in 2025, and it's been a doozy, and it will be more doozy like as we continue. I was curious, like what are some of the resources, even if they're just kind of principles, or if there's anything that you keep in mind just for yourself, like what are some resources for yourself that you wake up every day with and try to embody, or try to even share with others as we kind of go about 2025.
Yeah, on the everyday thing, I've been practicing waking up to gratitude. I don't for a very long time, for at least a decade, if not more. And some of that came from, of course, my Buddhist studies and community studies, but also working with homeless folks. So my practice is that when I wake up, as soon as possible, right? Because your mind is like ready to go. I come back to thank you for waking me up, and just giving thanks for that, and that I know who I am when I wake up. So just like getting to the real basic. And what I share with students or mentees is sort of like, I might then say, I hope you have a plan because I'm not in the mood, you know? And so what I call spirit is like, you know, they're my companion, my guardian, my friend, so I can talk like that. And then I very simply go to, thank you for this pillow. Thank you for these covers. Thank you for this bed. Thank you for this room. And depending on how much time I gave myself, I might go on a little bit more, giving thanks for my friends, giving thanks to be able to stand up out of bed. I don't usually go that far, in a consistency, but I might later go, yeah, thank you for this coffee, you know? So we can be in gratitude throughout the day. And there's so much to be grateful for that we can forget. When I was a kid, I can't remember all the circumstances. My mom used to say, be glad you can walk, and maybe I was whining for something, be glad you can see. And I took it in at the moment, but not like I do now, right? So gratitude is number one. Number two is, and I just want to confess, I haven't done it in the last few days. What is the vision that I have for myself today? What's the larger vision that I have for myself? And then what's the vision I have for the world? And and that has been my driver since I want to go back a little bit. So I canvass, there's the election, what was it, the 5th? And then I stopped watching the news until about last week. But one of the things that I immediately went to was the processes that I felt like I needed, which was grieve, rest. And so I actually I live in a building and there's a whiteboard downstairs. So I wrote grieve, rest, because so many people I know weren't willing to do either. They were like, what's the next action? Grieve, rest, gather. Grieve, rest, gather, rest, play. And so I went on with this thing. They just finally came down, but I did that for like 6 or 7 weeks. And it was amazing that it stayed up, and the reason it came down was good. There were some people were collecting resources for fires. But before that, it was sort of, I felt like that what was needed. So now I might say, grief, because we got stuff to grieve right now. Oh, sorry, my whenever I move, Zoom raises my hand. I was like, what happened? Um, Grieve, rest, gather, play, vision, plan. Because people go from grieving to planning. Let's see if I can lower this. It's going to move me again, probably. There you go. So that's sort of like, so that's my morning. I hope I didn't go too far.
No, no, no. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I do want to get into that grief in a second. But just like that intention of gratitude is a wonderful way of starting the morning. And I feel like gratitude is something that I always, whenever I hear someone having a gratitude practice or a gratitude element to their daily routine, I'm always like, oh yeah, I forget to be grateful for the things that because life is, I have things that are nice. This is a nice warm thing, and I can be grateful for that. It takes 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds, to appreciate the warmth of this jacket. And so it's a really wonderful reminder that it can be as simple as when you wake up, remembering, being grateful that you can remember who you are. I mean, that's something that's really wonderful, and it's very profound. And then, the pillows and the covers and everything like that. And then I also wanted to mention too, like, before we get into that grief element and the different stages of kind of getting a view together, or gathering together. That intentional living, and just similar to what you were doing with the retreat, where intention was kind of baked in with the whole experience, and also too with this gratitude element. Is there ever a point where you kind of get exhausted from being intentional, like living an intentional life? Because sometimes I could see someone getting burnt out from really trying to be in the moment, and would rather just kind of tune out and do something else. I was curious, like, if you have like an intention-based burnout program that for yourself that you like to do to click back in.
Oh my God, I have ADHD. I don't have to intentionally, do anything. It just happens sometimes. So, in that way, it can sometimes be a gift, because shifting can be, sometimes it's good, where I can shift away from the trauma, drama experiences of life. And, well, it is intentional that I watch cat videos, but um, I think that that shift happens, and I think that in my life, that's been running the show, is the moving around. So it's almost like, so the idea is to bake in the intentional practices. So the morning intentional practice, occasionally it doesn't happen, but I appreciate it. So because I love it, right? Because it's such an honoring, like it's not a burden. It's not like an intention that's a burden. Now, have I been writing it down for the last few days? Like I said, that's the extra step where I can like totally do something else. And you remind me also, like, what's behind that? Because some of probably what's behind that is the fear that maybe this doesn't have as much meaning. And I'm just coming up with this now. The fear that maybe this doesn't have as much meaning as I think, right? So that's, the voices that can come in. And I don't believe that. I really do believe in the writing practice. But I can see how, it's not like I'm not impacted, right? And it's going to show up somewhere. Usually it shows up in my admin. Like, my friend last night was like, I never check my email. He's like, because I never sit at my desk. And I'm like, dude, we have iPhones. We just don't check our email because it's overwhelming. It's like email's like my one thing. I wish it was one thing. But yeah, just like the burnout can happen, but my mind will take care of it. And it can be fun, because it's kind of fun. Like, for example, the gratitude, or remembering wherever you are when something happens. I played this game for a while. It still can happen whenever I hear a bell. So San Francisco is great because you got the trolley. So I've never gone to Plum Village, but I saw that film on Netflix, and I love that. Random sounds of bells can remind me to check myself out and ground if I can, but at least know where I'm at. I might already be grounded, but at least know. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's that invitation too of I think that maybe like I can speak for myself, but there's this like perfectionist element too where I want to be present for as long as possible, and if I don't, I lose, and that sucks. Like I don't like losing to the to my distractions, to my ignorance, or whatever it is. But then again, like like a bell is a really great example. So my practice is Soto Zen, and something that really dials me in is that a bell is rung 3 times by our reverend, and that really uh, helps clear my head and a lot of the other kind of chatter that goes on in my mind and my body. It just kind of immediately places me, grounds me. Um, and there is this like I don't want to call it like necessarily like a pleasure or something like that, but there is this maybe a joyfulness to being brought back into something. So there's the dizzying, oh, I'm ignorant, oh, I'm like, looking at random things on my phone, and then a bell will ring, or something along those lines. And then you come home for a second, there is this kind of like this really uh satisfying element of being grounded. And and that wouldn't happen if you didn't get distracted, right? So there's like
Right.
it's a nice thing like that. No, that's a so thank you for going into that, just because sometimes perfectionism kind of creeps its head, and I feel like I need to have some tools or resources for that. And
Yeah.
then mhm.
I want to say something before you move on, if you don't mind. But like what I gathered from what you said is from commitment to home. So at first it's like we got to make the commitment and then it's work. And now it's no longer work and it's home. And that's the practice, right? That's the fruit of the practice. So that the intention is no longer yeah, I think I already said it. It's just not work.
Yeah, no,
But
that's
like you were saying, like the burnout shifts. Yeah, and definitely, yeah. I think self-kindness, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here. Like you wouldn't know who I was. But because I would be, like you said, and when I'm on the highway, if you can't make those turns driving up the mountain in the lines, then you shouldn't be on the mountain. That's where my rule comes in. And so, if I couldn't be gracious with beginning again, then I'd be like in your mindset. I can't get it right. This is probably not for me. I should move on. You know?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that being able to return with kindness is so
Mm-hmm.
important. And I really I really enjoy your phrasing of that commitment versus home, or that
No
commitment
commitment to home.
commit to home.
From committing, doing the practice,
Mm,
and now it's not so much about having to do anything. The bell rings and you're home
right, right.
because you were committed to the practice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And then just to kind of go back to the grief element that we were talking about too, like where it comes to this the different stages that lead to a maybe more stable, grounded uh, reaction or something like that. And part of that is grief, and part of that maybe part of grief is accepting things as they are, and or as as accepting the pain, I guess, accepting the hardship of what's happening. And then there are things that eventually lead to play and togetherness and to vision and planning. And I'm not sure where you and maybe your building or your community are in this stage right now, because it does seem like the hits just keep coming, and then maybe grief is something that is ongoing, maybe playing is ongoing, and things like that. And I just want to know like what how do you approach that first step of grief? Just because that seems like a fundamental component of that trajectory.
Yeah. I think you said some of it. It's sort of like there's this allowing of acknowledging the pain, the suffering, some of the grief coming from our powerlessness over something that we feel is wrong and needs to change or be stopped. So I believe that it's one of the ways that we honor our life experience. And you probably know Khalil Gibran, right? And I use that poem or piece that he wrote around sorrow and joy often. Um, that we do have to go to the depths of our sorrow as it shows up. I'm not saying we need to create more, but be able to be with it. Um, and I want to say, yeah, to be able to be with it in a way that's authentic, that we're not like. So, for example, let me just pause for a second and just say, one of the things I talk to people about is how we have a tendency to re-traumatize ourselves. Like we know this is happening, but we need to look at it several times a day and all the different voices that talk about it happening versus knowing this is happening, honoring the suffering, putting it down, doing our work to heal. And it might be to grieve. So part of the importance of grieving is that it can bring us back to our true self, because that's what's going on. That's what's happening. And then it opens us up. It creates more space for us to be present and present for visioning, present for dreaming, present for play, present for holding each other metaphorically or physically in this collective suffering. And while I have this opportunity, I want to share. On the last retreat I led, someone sent me a note and said, "We, I'm missing that we're not grieving over Palestine." And and then I think it was a little flattery, but they were like, "I feel like you can really hold this for us. Will you do this?" You know. And so I the opportunity came. We had a session. We had a heart session that we had every day, and I told I read the note out loud. I didn't say who it was, and I said, so we're going to grieve, and what we're going to do is we're going to grieve our grieving. We're going to grieve our powerlessness. We're going to grieve for ourselves, because everybody had been grieving for Palestine. And so we can get into that place where it's out, out, out. Very important, very humane, very beautiful, but you're leaving yourself out. And so this is important for us to take time to honor that I do not and I cannot physically or in any other way stop the deportations, and they are breaking my heart. I want to honor that sadness for myself. Because it's real. And I know if I do that work and allow it, then I can show up with more intention and more energy when I'm meeting with the folks in my area that I've created a sanctuary room, and we want to figure out how do we do what we're doing and where else can we provide resources. So that's the other part about the grieving. Like I said, it opens and empowers. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, and it's very moving, that how you shared that, and thank you for allowing so much of your person and so much of your feeling to come out. I really do appreciate it. It is such a difficult time, and there's so much to grieve, and I think that it is so important. What you're saying is to take that time to acknowledge that you are grieving, that your heart is broken, and as much as you can grieve for something else, like for a cause, it's important to recognize what that sadness is doing to your body and to feel that
Mm,
powerlessness. But then that may be catalyzing to some sort of clarity, maybe some to the present, and can help you then find some footing. But it does it but I think that the way that I mean, I'm not someone that is an expert on grief whatsoever, but from my experiences with grief, it can come in waves and it can really surprise you, and it can
right.
kind of take you aback all of a sudden, and you can be, you can lose someone that's close to you, and of course there's that initial feeling, but maybe not until the funeral do you really understand what's going on, or even maybe
Right.
until that next holiday comes around. Then you really know that someone's missing, and then it's like, oh gosh. So it is it is a very powerful and at times surprising experience.
Mhm.
Certainly. And when it comes to when it comes to resources, and it does sound like the community that you live around and have near you has like boards for the California wildfires and things like that, and just like for your own the people that you are a mentor for or that you work with, what are some organizations or some brick and mortar places or other resources that might be of that that you look to, that you want to support, that you want to get some eyes and ears on, that are
Mm.
of help in these times?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's like I'm on this global uh, community. This probably one of my latest is this global community called the Tzedek Lab, and it's primarily anti-Zionist Jews, but not all. And they're doing work around anti-racism, and which includes, anti-discrimination and looking at what's happening in Palestine, but also what's happening here, um, how to support people here. So it's a great community. I get to do different things with this community, from co-working to talking about spiritual practices to receiving resources for trans and LGBT and sharing trans and LGBTQ resources. Um, and then the other, I mean, I belong to a synagogue, the Kahila, and we have a sanctuary room, so that's one of the places. I believe it's public. If not, it is now, but I think it is. Um, and probably one of the places that live most deep within me is the East Bay Meditation Center, because of the way that it supports our mindfulness and our groundedness and building community, but also teaches us how to be in right action with right energy. And it's almost like it's ongoing. Like there are enough teachers there that you can hop in to any of the classes, whether it's on weekends or affinity gatherings. So like there's an alphabet sangha that for the LGBTQ community. There's a BIPOC sangha. There's an anybody, any minds people for people with disabilities, and on and on. So there's a way that without being political, there's opportunities to engage mindfully and wisely when you're in political action. I believe that it's almost like I found that EBMC is like a grounding place for many of the social justice networks in the Bay Area and beyond. The Transgender Law Center, I've just recommended to somebody last night, because of all the connections that they have across the country as well as the Bay Area, they're a place for people to learn what their rights are right now, particularly trans youth, particularly trans people in general. And so that's like a big resource. And I also connected them, I shared them along with an organization called Song, and I wish I could remember all of it, but it's like, I can't remember, but if you Google Song and activism, you'll get this group in the South that has been doing social justice network work for a very long time and will likely know other places, right? Besides the ACLU. And yeah, there's like my mind is spinning with the plethora of places. And I just want to encourage people to reach out. Jewel is Jews on a Lonely Land is another place where people are connecting with how to support our native communities, which are also, or sorry, indigenous for some people, also under attack. I think I heard last week that that there was a mention of deporting Native Americans, which I understand. So here's the thing: I'm some of the like it's painful. None of it's surprising because they told us what was coming, right? So let's see if there's any one thing I wanted to name. I mean, while I'm on here, if you're watching, Dhamma Dena is in the desert, and it's a donation only retreat center, so it's available to lots of people who need resources. And there's programs going year round. And so many. Big Bear right now is supporting a few trans people who need housing because of the loss of fire. So I would reach out to just reach out and ask. And if they don't have something, like move to the next person.
Wow, thank you so much for offering so many different and so
I
many
know I
important
was, yeah.
organizations. No, 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 it's
It's I
great.
didn't want to leave anybody out. It's like, but I wanna touch back just for 1 second on the grief part. There are people who think that what happens is they get so overwhelmed in everything that's happening, it takes them to freeze. Part of that freeze is because they're not actually actively grieving. It's because they're stuck in the watching, in the engaging, and that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about grieving for ourselves. I just want to be really clear. When we're in active grieving, hopefully we're engaging with others as well, that they know that we're grieving, so that we're in that, sangha, right? Our community, our spiritual communities are one of the most, whether, no matter what the spirituality is, but particularly in our Dharma community, such an important place to be able to connect with others because we're all working in our ways, moving towards, practicing for this place of freedom and enlightenment. With all the, equity and justice and all the things that are wound up in it. And so the grieving is, yes, to honor yourself, but it's not so you stay with yourself. You don't have to be ashamed of it, but that it helps with the movement. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you because I think that grief can feel and is like a personal thing, but the important thing is, and this is where the kind of like a raw vulnerability comes into. It's like it's important to share, to let people know that you're grieving, and then
Hmm.
that might lead to a helpful conversation, that might lead to change. And after all, I mean, if you're sharing with people that care about you and that you care about, that you're going through something, that alone is a very important thing for building a sense of community. And then they can maybe they can do something to hold you a little bit. They can maybe hold space for you in certain ways, because after all, depending on how grief is manifesting in yourself, you might need some resources. You might need some things that you're not thinking about in other ways. So it's really important. So thank you for distinguishing between that kind of freeze and that kind of collapsing on within oneself, and maybe kind of shortening your vision and all that, to actually making grief an active like experience and a community experience.
And it gives others permission to grieve. That's also like we don't necessarily. What I learned in 2020 is that so many of us never had permission to grieve. We didn't have permission to cry. There are so many kids that grew up with the hush hush and like, so we actually need people modeling grieving in order to actually feel like we can do it and we're going to come out of it okay. That's not the end. Like I'm not going to get lost in it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Uh, no, and yeah, I mean, the 2020 and the way that the pandemic happened, I mean, there's so much that I think we're all still maybe even not accepting about how much that changed our life and everything like that. And so the more we take time to accept what had happened and what continues to happen and the things that are to come, it's very important to show that you can that that grief is something that you're allowed to hold and that you're allowed to share and that other people are allowed to they can be inspired to be more authentic with their feelings. And then briefly, I just want to get into how you mentioned like that you are engaged with a synagogue community, and I understand that Jewish practice, Jewish faith is something that is incorporated into your life, along with a journey through various different faith traditions and spiritualities, where in your life you have experimented with Wiccan and Taoism and various other things. I was just curious where, like, if you're someone to ask you, what is your metaphysical framework or what is your spirituality? Like how would you say that you maybe more or less identify, but like what is inspiring you right now, faith
Mm.
tradition wise?
Yeah. Let's see if I can phrase this. I have this I am statement, and it's like, I am a love and compassion activist. So I understand, I looked up religion once, and it said that it's something that you continue to do over and over. So my religion would be love, my faith would be compassion. Um, I don't need anything else. And all of these spiritualities support me in healing that, in understanding that, in being, certainly, in our Buddhist ways, being wise with that, maybe in our Jewish ways, being, um, you know, in confrontational relationships sometimes with what that means. Um, and exploring, like, looking even at Christianity and some of the contradictions in how that's practiced. But in when I'm looking at when I'm coming from just a little bit that I know of, like the Toltec, there's also this alignment with all things, and I just want to name, like, in Wiccan, like understanding, that there's this power that we receive just from our lives. It's not like this is just who we are, and that we get to use these powers to help create the experience that we want to see in the world. And then we can back into, Taoism as well as that's another way of sort of getting into the beginning again. Like, people don't really talk about that in Taoism, but there's also this, we begin where we are. Um, and right, if you, Taoism, you take Tai Chi, the practice of allowing the energy to flow. So that, oh my God, this is horrible. I feel it, but it's not mine to hold. I can't hold, you know, what's happening to trans people over the country. I can be aware of it and use my power once I let that go, maybe even use that same power to create something different. So for me, I'm in life, which is much bigger than any community or religion or culture. Um, and how do you be in all of it? Um, and like, take, what's needed, the Hindu chants, right? Honor it, and then I guess and then I guess exercise it in a way that supports the human, the non-human, the planetary experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that that is a very full embrace, I think, of so much of the truths that are available, and appreciating the what all these different manifestations of love and compassion, how they can kind of materialize in different cultures and different contexts, and how they can inform your more your personal relationship with love
Mm,
and with compassion. And uh it's a really beautiful, how you were describing it is a really beautiful way that you, that all those philosophies, all those cultures, all those approaches coalesce in your life, and how they feed that, they help bring into focus in their own special ways, in their own components, that love and compassion that is so vital to all of those traditions, spiritualities, however you wish to define them. But it's also deeply important for you and for our humanness, for the non-humans in our life, and also for our planetary and celestial experience. And but I do feel like that there are people that say, well, I am a participant, I am a practitioner of this faith tradition, and this is how I define myself. And they might be hesitant to giving themselves the permission to be someone that identifies as someone that practices love, that is someone that
mm,
has faith and compassion. They would rather have, well, this it's nice and safe for me to put up an organization in front of that question and say, whatever they say is kind of what I like. Whereas yours is much more open. I mean, yours is personal. It might not be you. You might have your own connection with it, but different people have different associations with the word love and compassion. So, what was your experience like? Growing up, exploring all these different faith traditions, continuing to do so, and giving yourself, maybe I'm phrasing this incorrectly, but giving yourself that permission to identify as someone that is invested in love, that is practices love, and has faith and compassion.
mm. Yeah, about maybe a couple of decades ago, I realized that I wasn't being as authentic as I could be. And somehow, you know, started reconnecting with my younger self, and that young person who was like really young, that was just like loving people. And I did, like, my adoptive mom was really, she sort of encouraged that, this in this way, as the Roaches would say, the band, everyone is good. And I remember her, I knew the Sam the mailman, and I knew the names of the beat cops, and the ice cream man, and the ice man. We living in New York, we were fortunate to have that European experience of, like, the knife guy, and everybody was coming through our neighborhood selling fish and selling things. And so we knew, certain people's names. So we knew the neighbors, we knew the people who were at the stores. Some of it, I believe, was for our safety, because then people would know who we were. But in the way that it was taught to me, it was like, oh, look at this beautiful, diverse world that we live in. I later got angry at some point because I never learned about racism, and that's a whole different story. But I wasn't supposed to, and I could talk about that in another time too. Um, when I was a little kid, we had a backyard, and my god family lived next door, and my god dad would bring home all these crabs, and the adults would, like, have this whole, like, crab thing because he went crab fishing, and I would have all the kids in the backyard explaining to them how God created the universe. And, I was just like taking everything I read, I spewed out, which was good and sometimes annoying. Um, I was definitely a little bit of a controlling kid. And and then I think it's partially ADHD, family disruption. Um, as I went into the world, I noticed there were all these things available for me to help me survive and help me to get through. And very young, at a very young age, Judaism was one of them. Um, and probably Judaism, Christianity, and Santeria I learned about. So I just learned about all these different ways of being. And so, just to round it off, so I don't go into every year, um, I really do, one of the saddest things that's happened over the years is that we took this idea of woke, which simply means to be able to wake up to the conditions under which one's lives. We took that idea of woke, and it's now like a bad word, right? Um, but in wokeness is where you learn who you are and in relation to everything else. And I think I lost my bigger thought because when I raised my hand, the hand went up. So coming back to, um, I want to jump forward to getting into this when I started engaging in Buddhist practice, and how a lot of things opened up for me, including around even my transitioning and what it means to reincarnate in this life, and being able to see the ways that I've reincarnated in this life. Um, I'm forgetting your question, but I'm going to wrap this up in a moment. um, we're born into this, so I believe we're on the Garden of Eden. It's called Earth. It feeds us, it waters, it gives us everything we need. And when we're fortunate, we can get into just the planet spaces where it's just gorgeous. You know, where Muir Woods in the Bay Area, or just going to the ocean. So the rest is made up. So we're born with these bodies, and we have certain organs that we're born with. Um, but how we show up it's all made up. Everything's made up. What's not made up is that everything that's made up is available. I mean, what's true is everything that's made up is available. I don't have to live in a box. For some people, that's safe. And like I say, thank God for the New Yorkers that never leave New York, or they'd be paying ridiculous train prices like we do. They keep the prices down. New York's like, oh no, you're not raising the train. I don't even think that they pay $3. I don't know to get, to go whatever, an hour ride. But my point being that I appreciate the people that get deep and grounded. I grow and learn from those people, but I can't live there. And I appreciate the people that go way high, like a Starhawk comes to mind in the moment. But I might not get there. But I can pull from everything in order to support the healing that I need and the healing that I want to bring, so that I can sit across from anybody. If I had to sit across from Donald Trump, I could. And we can engage in a conversation around his suffering if he was prepared, right? Because there's no hatred. You can't love and hate at the same time. You can't be love, as one of my pronouns, and have hate. It takes too much. Hate is yucky. So that commitment to be love, that commitment to be compassionate becomes your way of life. And I believe that that's how we're supposed to be. I'll just wrap it up there.
That was beautiful. That was very beautiful. I think like there's this element to it. I just really I admire that about your path and about how you approach things where yeah, you have hate is very it can release all the anger elements in your body. It can be very satisfying, like the hate and anger and the cortisol that shoots around your head and gives you those kind of rushes and things, and all the fun fantasies of destroying something or whatever it is. Um, but but you're drained after that, and then you've spent all that time not eating that sandwich that was in front of you the whole time. You were eating the sandwich, but you were thinking about something very upsetting, and so you just missed your whole lunch. And there could be nourishing that could have happened in that moment in more ways than just the food. And so I really do admire that desire and that life practice of yours, where you are doing your very best to embody love and to be that, and then to not fall into the trappings of engaging with hate, even though it can be quite a sticky uh substance. And then two, also another thing that I admire about your approach is that, and this is where that kind of similar perfectionism goes, and maybe even that want of like achievement, where uh, you can go into communities with people that are very much grounded in those communities, and then usually when you're grounded in a community, and depending on how you're taking the education or you're doing the practice, you could move up in rank, or so to speak. You can then become, from just being a congregant, you can become a spiritual leader, you can
Mm,
become something else, and then you have a trajectory, and then at the when you are of a certain age, you can kind of fall back and say, well, I know a thing or two about such and such, and that makes me feel satisfied as far as being a whatever it is that I practice. And that's all fine and good, and that's nothing bad necessarily. But for yourself that you need to kind of have some more space to explore. You need to incorporate more things in your life. And then two, there are people that go off into the mountains, metaphorically or literally, and then
mhm,
they are all about bringing the transcendent in their body here and now, and really leaving, like, they're going full liberation. And
mhm,
there might be important things to you in your life that your friendships are important, or whatever it is that keep you from becoming fully uh off and away from the everyday realities of maybe people that live in cities or towns or farms or whatever it is. And so I see that as, those are two different paths, where one is almost like a full renunciant spiritual path, where you are really going for it, full liberation. And then maybe full liberation can happen also in these grounded communities, but you operate in this space that's a lot more fluid and a lot more open, and you can take
mm,
inspiration from all kinds of things, and your approach makes it much more approachable and more accessible.
mm.
And so I am getting a lot of inspiration from that, so thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, and remember to let yourself off the hook, because it's like, it's crazy. It's not like I don't have those thoughts, and of like whatever it is, like, yeah. Um, but how beautiful is it to like recognize that you have it and be able to pull back, right? I don't eat in front of any news because I don't want to digest, right? So if my mind is going crazy, I might just put on a funny. If I need to watch something, it might be something that's funny or enlightening. So I want to digest love, peace, and possibility. And I think maybe it's my ego talking, or I don't know, but I feel like I just need to name what is clear is that I'm not perfect, right? It's not about being perfect. It's about really being in it and alive, but choosing to be love and compassion. Doesn't mean I'm not like occasionally going, okay, you can't think that right now. That's not okay. But because of the choice, like you said earlier, from committing to practice to finding practice, or finding home is, practice is home. It's the same kind of operation. Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. Yeah. No, and thank you for, always allowing that space, because like there is this inclination, at least for myself, where I can get very hard on myself for like not doing the thing correctly. And then it's important to, like we talked about before, it's like that those distractions can make for very satisfying re-entries and looking agains into your practice. And then I just want to say, thank you so much for your time. I just had two quick questions, if that's all right, that as we come to a close here. One is, if you have anything that you would like to promote, anything that you're working on, anything that is going on, anything that you are trying to get more ears and eyes on, or if, I know we mentioned a lot of great organizations earlier, but if there's anything else that comes to mind when it comes to anything that you want to get the word out about. And then the second thing is, if you have any advice for someone that is walking the Buddhist path, that you would have wanted to have heard, and we can open it beyond Buddhism too. But if there's anything that you would want to offer as advice to a younger version of yourself as you were kind of coming along,
Right.
and then as we think about that, I just want to mention that you do have a let's see, I'm just trying to find it here. Affirmative Acts Consulting, which I believe is affirmativeacts.org. That's where you
Yeah.
can be found for coaching, consulting, mentoring, spiritual leadership retreats, and also too, you are featured in uh, was it Transcending Trans Buddhist Voices,
Mm,
which is edited by Kevin Manders and Elizabeth Marston, and you have two beautiful pieces in there. So I just wanted to mention those as we go into that.
thank you so much. I think that your first question was, for the last, since 2020, in 2021, I was invited to offer cutie pock retreats at Dhamma Dena. And so they've been cutie pock strong, now more obvious because straight people kept showing up and not knowing what it was. And so yeah, I'm talking to, you know, what I've been doing with my practice is bringing in new teachers. And so if there's something that you're interested in, because people just like, some of them are going off to different programs and doing different things. I would say check out Dhamma Dena and look for teaching opportunities. And you can certainly reach out to me. And there's a spring cutie pock retreat coming up, if anybody sees this. There's also a trans retreat. It's called Transcending Retreats. And that retreat is not Dharma based, but it is healing based, and it's for all people on the trans masculine and non-binary masculine leaning experience. Otherwise, that's what comes to mind. I wish I was. Oh yeah, Dark and Tender is the film that I was just being a part of, and look out for it in film festivals near you. There will be a showing in Seattle, one coming up in Denver. So I want to promote that. And that's it for promotion. For practice is self-kindness is the most important part. So, you go on retreat, you practice 45 minutes, 3 or 4 times a day, you come home and you do that for a week and then it's over. So one of the things is to, if you can pay a little bit more attention to your body. I didn't, after my month long, I didn't have to set a time to practice. The practice called me. So the practice will begin calling you after a while, and you have to make a commitment if you want to step into the practice. Practicing with friends and buddies, I could have done more of that. But I did have people, I probably could text them now, but I had people that I could text. Do you have 5 minutes? Do you have 10 minutes? Do you want to sit? 15, whatever. So literally like using your community, or I'm sorry, I don't want to use the word using, engaging with your community and finding out, even at the end of the night when it's like the practice session is over, you might just say, hey, I'm looking for people to do spontaneous practice with. So I would do more of that. And then I think the last part, yeah, I'm actually shifting from coaching to doing more spiritual mentorship, which I've been doing for a really long time. And I'll engage in some coaching models, but please do reach out to affirmativeacts.org. The website's being updated. I built it myself, so it's not the best, but after 4 years or 5 years, I'm finally going to try to re-up it. I think I covered all your.
You certainly did. No, that was wonderful. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for going over everything. And yeah, I just wanted to just quickly mention that I'm getting a lot of inspiration from what we talked about today. But the just lastly, this last little bit that you mentioned, if there's anyone that's up for spontaneous practice for like a spontaneous sitting or something like that, what a fun invitation. And it's just, even if it's something that you don't do in community, you can do you like, can you invite yourself to a spontaneous practice? What if I did the dishes with practice element, and just like, what if I just tried that, and just having that spontaneity as part of your practice is really interesting and inspiring. So thank you. And Lev, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to hearing more about Dark and Tender. Hopefully I can see it in festivals. If not, once it's done doing its circuit, it'll be made available for wider distribution. And thank you so much for being so inspiring and for doing what you do.
I'm going to interrupt your ending and see if you'd like to take a minute to practice now
Sure, let's do it.
with our people, just 60 seconds. I'll make sure I have a clock on. But we'll start with a ding. All right, and before we close this session, just remembering that we're worthy of our own love, our own attention, and that through that work we can offer a greater love and attention to the ones around us, to our Sangha, to our friends and family. And wishing everyone to live with peace and ease this moment and beyond. Cool. Might as well do the yes.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful way to close. And so thank you. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.